I so look forward to updating my reading journal with you every month. So let's have a look at everything I read in July and also set up some tracking spreads for August. Hi, my name's Erin. I'm so excited you want to talk about books with me. I hope July was as good a reading month for you as it was for me because I have come in at a much higher average star rating for the month than I have for the past several, actually. We'll fill out all my end of month stats for July a little bit later on, but for now, let's update my overall list of all the books I've read this year. Usually I sit down a couple of times a month and update my reading journal so I'm sort of on top of things. I didn't do it that way this month. I didn't do any of my reading journal until the 29th of July. So there was quite a bit to update. I was really feeling the rom-com vibes this time, apparently not so much fantasy going on for me for the month of July, but apparently I picked my rom-coms really well. I do feel like I didn't completely remember enough about the books that I read earlier in the month to make my review pages though, so I want to try to stay on top of my reading journal a little bit more throughout August so that that's not a problem. Going through my goal tracker here and just colouring in a space for each of the books that I've read throughout July because that's how I like to do it. So each month has its own colour, so it's really clear how much I read in which month. My reading goal for the year is 100 books and I'm currently sitting at 61. I think Storygraph says I'm 3 books ahead, so that's pretty good. Also got a little bit of updating to do to my series tracker. I read the next one in the Chestnut Springs series. I got some thoughts about that one. These two are my book club spreads where I keep track of the overall choices for the book clubs throughout the year. I've got a new one to add to the Literary Ladies, which is a book club I have with some friends in real life. And I'm going to use these post-its over here to make a list of all the book covers that I need to print so that I can complete my journal for the month. And isn't it such a good feeling when you can cross something off your maybe next TBR, whatever you want to call that? We're into my July tracker pages here, so I'm just going to pull out every shade of grey marker that I own because my theme was monochromatic for the month of July, and we're going to update my progress calendar. So this is just a regular little bullet journal style calendar, and I use it to mark out how long it took me to read each of the books that I read in a month. I tend to read a fair few books a month, so I find that this is just an interesting way to visually present the data. It doesn't help me at all, I just think it looks cool and I have a good time doing it. If you're curious about any of the stationery I used to set up these July tracker pages, I actually did that in my last reading journal video, so I'll have that linked for you in the description if you like. I know you can barely see this grey marker on screen right now. I think it's actually drying out. I think I've used it up, so that's a shame. It's the N89 and it's my favourite Tombow dual brush pen, like for highlighting every second line and stuff like this. I'm gonna have to replace that one, I think, so I won't use that again for this calendar. I'll just stick to the other 3 grey markers that I'm using. And once we get into the review pages and also my August setup with the tracking kind of stats pages for August, I'll have as much of the stationery that I use for those as I possibly can linked in the description too, in case you want to get your hands on any of it. Underneath the calendar, I have the book covers for kind of the books I set the intention to read. This used to be me being like, what do I feel like reading next month? These days it's me like, what do I have on reserve through the library for the upcoming month? Because obviously those have to be a priority because they have a time limit on them and then I have to return them. So most of those book covers will correspond with a name of a book that's going up above, but if there isn't one there for it yet, that's because I didn't know at the start of the month that I was going to end up reading that one, so we will add those together soon. Also, in case you're wondering how I keep track of all this data, you can actually see a little bit of it on my phone there on the left side of the screen. I use an app called Storygraph to kind of collate all of my reading info. I just update it as I start and finish and make my way through books, and I can tell it which format I read it in, and it remembers the date that I started and finished, so I don't have to keep track of all that stuff myself. I do have a link to my Storygraph in the description too, in case you want to be friends there, and I do still also use Goodreads. I use both, but Storygraph is where the stats are at, and I really like the stats. So we're getting close to being finished with the progress calendar here. We're adding, you can really tell the ebooks versus the audiobooks for this month because it took me a lot longer to read ebooks because I just haven't had that much time, and that's where we are right now, the 30th. Did I say 29th before? I meant 30th, sorry. The last couple of books here, the ones that I'm still reading, are The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern and A Tempest of Tea. I didn't end up finishing either of those before the end of the month, so they're just going to continue on off the calendar, but at that point I didn't know that yet. So let's carry on to where the review pages are going to go, and I'm actually just going to use some sticky notes and plan out where they're going to go and make sure I've got all of the appropriate book covers for those based on the ones I already had printed versus the ones that I still need to print. Also, I leafed ahead through the journal and I think I'm going to run out of pages for this one probably at the end of September, so I will have to start a new reading journal probably for October, which is fine to not fit a whole year into a journal. My last reading journal I fit heaps. like a year and a quarter, but I am much more inclined to fill a journal than I am to like try and smush all my reviews in to make it work for a year. So setting up a new journal is fun. The first of the reviews I'm doing here is for Faebound, which was our Page Majors book club choice for the month of July. Thanks to Jacqueline for choosing this one. If you're not familiar with the Page Majors, it is my very own book club that I run through my Discord server, which you have to be a channel member to access. We have one book a month for the Page Majors book club, which is suggested by the members of the Page Majors. We have like a suggestion box and I choose one from there. We have a channel that's just for the book so we can discuss it throughout the month as we all go. And then at the end of every month, we have a little call so we can catch up somewhat in person and talk about it in real time as well. On the right page, I've actually got my answers to our discussion questions for the book that we talked about in our little chat. And on the right page is just my like word vomit review. Faebound was okay. It's a fantasy novel. It's got a lot of characters, so many characters. A lot happens, but it also doesn't feel super detailed. I didn't dislike it, but there was a point around the 20% mark and leading up to that where I nearly wanted to not finish. I pushed through and it did get a lot more interesting, but I've landed on 3 stars for this one. It's got elves, it's got fae, it's got magical creatures, it's got lots of war and politics dynamics going on too. It kind of has 2 female main characters, both with their own separate love interests, and they are also sisters, so I thought that was a really cool twist on the typical protagonist kind of plotline. It's kind of got 2 protagonists. But I wouldn't say that I enjoyed it enough to be motivated to continue with the series, unfortunately. Moving on to the next one, you might remember last month I read the 3rd in the series of feminist novellas from Hazelwood, and I loved it. I continued on with them. I read them completely out of order, so I started with the 3rd one, and then I read the 1st one, and then I read the 2nd one. When it comes to novellas in my reading journal, I like to give them this kind of condensed, very simplified overall page, and I read another novella as well, The Honeymoon Crashes by Christina, so I thought I would just condense the Hazelwood one, and I think it's called Stuck With You? Yeah, that seems right, and the Unhoneymooners, and put them on a page together. Also, if you're wondering what these stickers with the funky letters on them are all about, that's the Corpile rating system, which is a book rating system devised by G of Book Roast, which is a YouTube channel also about books. It's a really interesting way to rate your books in a somewhat more like scientific way than just going by the vibes, which is also a totally valid way to rate books and something that I did for many years. Corpile is an acronym standing for characters, atmosphere, writing, plot, intrigue, logic, and enjoyment. And so you give each one of those categories a rating out of 10, add up your total score, and then divide that by 7, and that gives you a decimal point number that relates to a scale that G, who created the system, has come up with, and that gives you your star rating. I really like it. I think maybe for next year I'm going to massage the range of scores that fit into which star rating just to make it a little bit more accurate for myself. Like, I think it's a great system, but I think I could adapt it to suit me a little bit better than it currently does. Oh, I said it was Stuck With You, didn't I? And I'm actually doing Under One Roof. So Under One Roof must have been the first one in the feminist novella series. Look, I've said this before about Hazelwood. She does the same thing over and over, but she does it so well that I can't be mad at it. She's really, really good at her like woman in science rom-coms. This one was a little bit different. This one had some like forced proximity. Girlie inherits a house and has to live with the nephew of her friend that she inherited it from, and they hate each other, or do they? You might remember from last month when I read the 3rd one in this novella series, I was obsessed with it and I loved it. I think that made me set the bar a little too high for this one, maybe? I still enjoyed it, but I gave it 3.5, which is pretty low for me for an Hazelwood book, but not a low score overall. Then we've got The Honeymoon Crashes by Christina. This one is sort of the 1.5 follow-up novella to The Unhoneymooners, which I read back in May, I think. This one follows the best man and maid of honor of the 2 main characters from The Unhoneymooners while they're planning their wedding in Hawaii. They've never met before, they're a little bit dubious about each other's planning skills, but they have like a week to put together a fantastic wedding, and of course they have to get to know each other in the process, don't they? It was so much fun, and Harry Shum Jr. from Glee and many other wonderful things that I love voices the male main character. This is one of those full cast audiobooks. As far as I know, it's only available on audiobook, but I might be wrong about that, so don't hold me to it. I also have been updating my star ratings and my Corpile ratings back on that overall like stats tracker page. Let's move on to the next one. This is a full-length book. I listened to this one on audiobook. It's called Starling House by Alix E. Harrow. This is just one of those lucky incidents where I needed an audiobook and I didn't have anything available yet that I'd had on reserve, so I just went into the available now section and I picked something based on the cover and the blurb, and it was Starling House, and it ended up being my top-rated book for the month. As much as I said I wasn't really reading fantasy this month, this book has some fantastical elements, so I don't know if that counts? It's one of those set in the real world but magic exists kind of books, but I wouldn't say that it's urban fantasy either. It's like a magical realism, maybe? Our main character, Opal, is a young woman who is raising her younger brother. She doesn't have a lot to her name and she kind of has to cheat and steal to survive. She lives in a very prejudiced small town that's really built around its mining industry, and she finds herself really drawn to this gothic mansion that is supposed to be haunted and creepy and nobody ever goes in or out, but sometimes the lights are on. She manages to land herself a job as a housekeeper at that creepy house, which is Starling House, the titular Starling House. She meets the custodian and ends up finding out that she has a lot more in common with him than she would have expected. But creepy things keep happening in connection with this house. There are supernatural creatures taking people and killing them, and we don't really know why. This story is very dark and gothic, but it's also really uplifting and heartwarming. I really liked the characters. The writing is beautiful and lyrical, and also the way the audiobook is delivered I thought was fantastic. I didn't have any issues listening to it at all, and I'm pretty picky about the delivery of my audiobooks. To decorate this page, I've used some washi tape from Journal Say that I just got very recently. The frame with the wings on it is also from Journal Say, and the little birds are from Sticky. I don't actually know what a starling is. We don't have those in Australia, but I was like, birds. We'll just put birds. They're not kookaburras, therefore maybe they're starlings. Do you ever have things that just pop up in multiple places in your life all in one go, and you're like, what is this symbolism? Because this is actually not the only book that featured starlings that I read this month. The other one was a novel love story by Ashley Poston, which we'll talk about soon, but I remembered I also had written down a quote, which I just saved them in my phone. I added that to the page, and then I remembered I had a quote for Faebound that I hadn't put on the page either, so we just nipped back to add that one. As I mentioned, top-rated book for the month. Everything pretty much was 8s and 9s across the board for the categories here for me, which means it was 8.29 on the core pile scale, which makes it 4.5 stars. Pretty sure that would have been a 5-star in my vibes rating system that I was using last year. I haven't given a single 5-star to a book since I started using the core pile scale, and I sort of want to go back to that, so that's why I want to change things up a little bit. But anyway, we're moving on to the next spread. This one is for Powerless by Elsie Silver, which is the third book in the Chestnut Spring series. I really enjoyed the first 2 books in the Chestnut Spring series. This one felt like it was by a completely different author. The writing was somehow suddenly really childish. It was like it hadn't been edited very well, maybe. I didn't enjoy the characters, I didn't enjoy their dynamic together, I didn't really believe it, and I don't think this couple have a future. I'm sorry, I just don't see Jasper and Sloane sticking it out. I ended up writing quite a bit about this one, and it's basically just a roast, so if you love these books, please feel free to not read my review here. Also, I should have mentioned this ages ago. If you don't want spoilers, please don't read my written reviews. I'll never give you spoilers in the voiceover because I'm just not about spoilers, but if you read the reviews, things will be spoiled, so just keep that in mind. This one actually made me think I almost don't want to continue the series, but my friend Rachel has read them ahead of me and she really likes the next book in the series, and we have pretty similar taste most of the time, so I'm going to trust her and move on to Theo's book. But I thought Jasper and I were going to get along really well, and then he betrayed me, so oh well. 2.57 on the core pile rating system, which makes this one a flat 2 stars. Do not recommend, sorry. Also, there's some really inaccurate representation of what it's like to be a professional ballerina in that book too. Yeah, I'm just not buying it. Anyway, that's alright, because we're going to move on to a book that I enjoyed a whole lot more. And as you can see, we're setting up another little novella spread here. So this is an interesting one because I'm setting up space for 2 novellas because that's how it makes sense on the page. But at that point, Stuck With You is the only other novella that I'd read in the month, so I was like, well, maybe I should try and read another novella so I can use up this space. So I started one. I didn't finish it in the month, but I did start Lonely Hearts Radio, which is an Audible original, and I finished it on the 1st of August. So it won't be in this video, it'll be in the next one, but it's gonna go in that space. What I did read was Stuck With You by Hazelwood, which is the second one in the Steminist novella series. I may have done myself dirty by reading the third one first, but that's just how it worked out with my library holds. I'm not too mad at it, but they did seem to all be pretty decent, but like get better as they went through the 3. So this one is my second favorite of the bunch, Stuck With You. It's very cute. They get stuck in an elevator together, and something about that forced proximity always works for me. I don't know. The main characters in this one are Sadie and Eric, and I just prefer their dynamic over Liam and Mara from the previous. If you're not into miscommunication, this one might drive you crazy, but I actually thought it was like quite justified miscommunication in this instance. So I gave this one 7.14, which is 4 stars. I always like to make sure I have that overall core pile rating as well as the star rating on this page so that when it comes time to work out what my number 1 read for the month was, it's really easy because I have all that data on the page to compare, because that does relate to my book bracket, but we're not going to do the book bracket today in this video. So remember how I said earlier that there were a couple of things that were recurring for me in books this month? I had 3 female main characters who were all called Eileen, and 2 of them were in this book because they share a name because they're related. This is The Switch by Beth O'Leary. How do you get away with 2 main characters with the same name? You give one of them a nickname. This is very much a Lorelai and Rory kind of situation, like Gilmore Girls, where the older Eileen is the grandmother of the younger Eileen, but the younger Eileen goes by Lena. I've read lots of Beth O'Leary's books before and I always really enjoy them. She's great. This one is a British rom-com. It's set between London and Yorkshire. Lena is a young professional working in London, but she is burned out, she has a panic attack at work, and she's forced to take a sabbatical. Her grandmother, Eileen, has recently been left by her husband of her entire life, and she's looking to get out there and have an adventure, maybe the youth that she never really got to have. So she and Lena decide to switch places, hence the name The Switch. I quite often go into books without really any idea of the plot if it's an author that I know I've loved the work of before, and that was the case with this one. I don't know if I would have set out as a 36-year-old woman myself to read a book where one of the main characters was like in her 80s, but I'm really glad that that was the case for this book because it was so lovely. It was also a love story for both of the main characters, and I thought that was fantastic that our older lady also got to have a love story. But even though this is a rom-com, I feel like the romance was not as important in this one as the relationship between grandmother and granddaughter, and also their relationships with themselves. 7.43 on the core pile scale for me, which means this one is 3 3/4 stars, not quite 4 stars, but very close. As much as I enjoyed that the romance wasn't like as much of the main focus of the book, I'm a very romance-driven person, so maybe that's why it scored just a little bit lower for me. Gonna have to print some book covers before I can move on because I have run out of the book covers I had pre-printed, and then we're going to move on to the review page for the other Eileen book, A Novel Love Story by Ashley Poston. I love Ashley Poston. She writes rom-coms that always have a magical twist. So if you've read The Dead Romantics, you might know that the male main character is not alive. That sounds like a massive spoiler, but I promise you it's something that happens very early on in the book and is like known, so I promise that wasn't a spoiler. If you've read The 7-Year Slip, you might know that it's got an apartment in it that is a time slip to 7 years forward or backwards in time. In A Novel Love Story, our main character finds herself in the small town of her favourite romance novel series. She's not really sure how she got there, and things don't seem to be going so well in the town since the author of that series passed away without being able to actually finish the final book. And she's not totally sure how she's going to get home either because her car is busted. But like, who hasn't wanted to just wake up one day and discover that you're in the world of your favorite book and talk to all the characters? Like, what a dream. I was actually kind of surprised with this one because I love the previous 2 books of Ashley Poston's that I've mentioned. This one took me a while to get into. I did this one on ebook, and I think it was around about a third of the way into the book before I started to be like, yeah, okay, I do really want to know what is going to happen next. And yes, this lettering really did take a long time, but I had a really good time doing it. I love copying the typography from book covers. I can't explain it to you, I just really enjoy it. It did make my hand really tired though. If you're someone who likes to look out for the Easter eggs of like characters from other books from an author popping up in their subsequent books, you'll enjoy hunting for the characters from the previous Ashley Poston books in this one. I still really enjoyed this book, but it just wasn't quite on the same level as The 7-Year Slip and The Dead Romantics for me. I ended up rating this one a 7 on the core pile rating system, which means it is 4 stars even. I do have another Ashley Poston book on my reading list for August though. I don't have it in the pages that we'll have a look at later on because I didn't know yet at the time I was setting this up, but it's The Bewitching Hour, which is a Buffy prequel that follows the story of Tara, so that's going to be really interesting. I am a pretty big Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan, so I think that's going to be right up my alley. I'm looking forward to it. But while we're talking about a novel love story, if you could find yourself in the world of any book that you've read, which world would you choose? We're going to go rocketing on to my very last book review spread for this video before we get into the August tracking pages. This one is Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez, which I read on the recommendation of my book buddy Rachel. She was right, this book was great. I have read 2 full-length Abby Jimenez books in the past and really enjoyed both of them. I really got to read some more of her stuff because she is good. She somehow manages to balance having really dark things happen to her main characters, but still having them turn out these wonderful humans and being so relatable and so compassionate, and the way that she approaches the stories, I don't know how to describe it, but she's masterful. Just for the Summer is actually the 3rd book in a series. The series is called Part of Your World, which I believe is the same title as the first book in the series, but they're standalone series, you know, when it's like interconnected but not necessarily always sequely kind of books. So this was the only one so far that I've read from that series, and I don't feel like I needed any other backstory to follow it. But the audiobook version I listened to had an interview with Abby Jimenez at the end, and she talked a little bit about some of the characters that appear in other books and kind of how it felt to bring them back. So it's very interesting. I'm intrigued now. I want to read the other ones. I severely messed up my stamped lettering for this one though, so this book deserved better than that. I'm very sorry to Abby Jimenez for messing up the way I was lettering your title here. I ended up having to move it onto some sticker paper and rearrange stuff, and I ended up putting the right next to the for with no break, and like I could probably fix it better, but at this point I'd been reading journaling, it felt like all day, so I just was like, I gotta get this finished. My hand is so sore, you know, from that paint marker lettering from earlier. This book has 2 points of view. It has Emma and Justin. They first get in touch because Justin posts an "Am I the asshole?" question to Reddit, and Emma responds because Justin mentions that everybody he dates after they date him goes on to find their soulmate and get married, and she has the same, as she calls it, curse. They work out that if they date each other and then break up, that maybe they will both also meet their soulmates after each other, and hijinks ensue. But both of them also have fairly troubled, kind of dark things that have happened in their past that they're dealing with. I just love how complex and flawed and grief-stricken some of Abby Jimenez's characters can be, but also be really compassionate people. You really root for them. I just feel like Abby Jimenez must be a lovely person from the way that she writes about troubled people. I cannot explain it any better than that. I gave this one 4.5 stars, and I thought it might have been my top rated book for the month, but Starling House beat it out just by like a couple of, like, not even a whole point, by like 0.29 of a point. That's it for all the reviews for this time, so we're going to turn the page. I'm leaving one blank there. Whatever my next book is that I finish will go there as long as it's not a novella. And we're going to move on to my tracker pages for August. And I'm starting with this kind of icy blue colour scheme with some gold gilded accents. I'm using some washi tapes from a couple of different sets from Journal Say, and I'm going to be using some washi tape stickers as well from the washi tape shop. My first spread is usually a cover page and my reading stats page that I fill out at the very end of the month once I've completed all of my reading. So on the left page at the moment, I'm just setting up a frame made out of washi tape, and I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side. So I'm actually layering 2 washi tapes here. I got the idea from a YouTuber I follow who sometimes stacks different like elements of molding to make a really pretty detailed molding situation for her house. Kind of the same concept, but with washi tape. Much faster and easier my way. The left page is just a cover page. It's literally just going to have August and decoration on it, and that's it. And the right page will be where my stats go. And if my cat Mitsu isn't showing up to check on my journaling, am I really journaling? I don't know if I am. I'm replicating that frame on the right page as well, and I'm just going to make sure that all of my stats fit inside. So I've gone through with some pencil first to make sure that everything's going to fit on the page the way I like it. And by having the frame exactly the same on the right page as the left, we're starting to kind of build a theme out here with the colors, with the patterns, with the shapes. I really enjoy my statistics page. Filling it out at the end of the month is just really interesting for me. I don't have any particular reason that I would need this data. I just think it's interesting and fun. And so that's the only reason I include it. I just like to see it. As I mentioned, I use Storygraph to keep track of all my reading stats, so I've actually just taken things from its built-in statistics that it shows you anyway very easily. So that's the number of books I complete in the month, the total number of pages read. It converts audiobooks to pages for me. I have no problem with that. I'm alright with just seeing that as a total number. I also very rarely listen to audiobooks on 1x speed, like regular speed, so it wouldn't be correct anyway if it gave me like a minutes read or hours read measurement. Anyway, there are some pie charts there. I've got page number, I've got format, and I've got library versus bought books, so I can keep track of how much of that is which. Mostly library for me. Oh, I've also got one above their average rating too. It's a little hard to read these ones at the moment because they still have the pencil underneath, but it'll get easier once I erase that. Standout book down the bottom, I'll put the cover of whichever was my most enjoyed book for the month, and on the other side I'm adding in genres as well. For the month of June and then also July, I did this like star rating graph thing. I didn't like it, so I'm not including it this time. You may or may not know this about me. I am a huge fan of tea. I drink so much tea, and I have the Tea Temptations washi tape sticker set from the washi tape shop. I'm using one of the rolls from that to decorate this setup because the colors are just so perfect with those washis. Like seriously, look at that. However, I do think that the tea in this set looks more like coffee, which I don't actually drink. If you're into coffee, please by all means imagine it as coffee. I want it to be tea, therefore, to me, it's tea. Does that make sense? It also has croissants and coffee, and those are other things that I really enjoy, so it's fine. My new month setups for my reading journal are usually 3 spreads, and this one is no different. So for this one, we've already set up the cover and the stats page. That means this next spread is going to be where my calendar goes and what I call my maybe next, which is just my slightly less pressure way of saying to be read. I don't like to be read as a term. It seems a little bit too forceful. So maybe next is what I go with instead. If you have been watching my bullet journal videos lately, you'll know I've been including a little grid spacing measurement guide as an overlay when I set up my pages so that you can kind of copy them. I'm not doing that for the reading journal because it doesn't vary that much from month to month, but just know I'm using a B5 journal, so if you're using a different size journal to me, my measurements probably wouldn't work for you anyway. And the size of my calendar boxes are always 4 spaces by 4 spaces, so you can kind of work it out from there anyway, just kind of work out where the center of the page is and count in each direction, and you can do the same thing as me, just you'll probably have to do a little bit of maths. I'm also including a little strip that's just 1 space tall, which is where I'm writing the number for each day, so that it doesn't interfere with the book titles when I'm writing them on this progress calendar. That annoyed me last month, so I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't a thing for me this time. Also, I completely messed up the numbers here somehow. I went from 22 straight on to 24 and I skipped 23 altogether, and then I was confused about why I had one more calendar box than I actually needed, but it still looked the same as the one on my Google Calendar, so something was clearly wrong. It's alright, white paint marker to the rescue. We can update those numbers and everything will fit much better. Since on my last progress calendar I was using monochrome, kind of shades of grey, because my theme was black and white, and so that was the only way I could kind of think of to do it. For this one I'm going to use all different shades of blue. I haven't put any of it down yet because at the time I was filming this the month hadn't started yet, so you'll see me filling this out in next month's video, and you can hit subscribe and stick around for that if you'd like to. So shades of blue on this one, and I think it's going to look really pretty when it's done. Using that washi tape layering technique again here to bring in those elements of the washi from the previous page, because I want to make sure this feels cohesive and like it's all one theme. Just because the colors match doesn't mean that I'm always necessarily satisfied that it looks thematic enough, so I like to try and use the same elements on each page where I can. I didn't have any of that wide floral washi on the previous page, but I think just adding these little thinner washi strips really helps to tie it together. And the tea, of course. We've got one more page to set up for the August preparation stuff, and this one is for my Page Majors book for the month of August. So if the book club is something you're interested in, pay attention, because I'm going to tell you what the book is for next month. Well, for this month now. It is August, isn't it? My goodness. As I mentioned, I have a book club. You need to be a member of the channel, so you can hit the join button down below if you'd like to find out more about how much that costs and what's involved. On the Page Majors level, you have access to the Page Majors book club. We just had our chat about Faebound a couple of days ago, and we're moving on to a book that is a very different genre for the Page Majors. We haven't done anything in this area before. This book seems to be a bit of a murder mystery, kind of a Final Girl sort of book, but with a supernatural element. I don't know for sure because I haven't read it yet. But the book is called Ask for Andrea. It's by Noelle W. Ely. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her name correctly. I hope I am, but I apologize if I'm not. This book was suggested by Leanne, the Page Mage. Thank you, Leanne, for dropping this one in the suggestion box. If you're keen to join in the read along with us, then go and check out the channel membership link. And if you are already a Page Mage, but you're not in the Discord, or you haven't popped in a while, you're absolutely still welcome to just pop in and out as you like. I totally respect the lurkers because I have been a lurker many times myself, but I do think with something like a book club, it is more fun if you are contributing your thoughts and kind of chiming in too. So don't be afraid. I really want to talk to you about books. It's really fun. I always like to have a dedicated Page Majors spread within my tracker pages because that just helps me to really focus in on coming up with the questions that we're going to use to discuss the book when we have our little chat about it. I like us to have a focused kind of directed chat so that we can all kind of think about what we're going to say. And some of the other Page Majors also keep reading journals, and so it can be a really nice way to have prompts for your reading journal if you're using actual book club discussion prompts. It can be a good way to work out what you need to write in your review if you're a bit stumped on that kind of thing. I'm just flipping back to my maybe next page here, and I'm going to populate it a little bit with some book covers. For my other book club, the literary ladies that I have with some real life friends, we've decided on Done and Dusted by Lila Sage for our next read. I'm actually not going to be able to make the call for this one because I'm going to be traveling with my partner's family, so I won't make the book club chat. So I've taken the pressure off myself a little bit. I put it on the back burner and I'm sourcing it through the library, which means I have to wait a little bit, but I'm okay with that because that means it's free. Also adding my little Ask for Andrea over here on the side, and I apologize, Leanne, I forgot to put the dash in your name. I'm so sorry, I spelled it wrong. The other books I'm putting on my maybe next for August are books that I've already started, actually. So Done and Dusted, as we've just talked about, but The Night Circus I'm already reading. I'm going really slow on this one at the moment. Hopefully the fact that I'm going to be traveling means I can read it on planes and stuff soon and get some more read. And A Tempest of Tea. This one's actually been on my maybe next for the past 2 months before this as well. My library hold finally came through in July and I'm reading it at the moment, so hopefully I will finish it real soon. A couple of days have passed since our last clip and now we've finally finished July, so I can jump in and add my final updates here to the tracker pages. So I didn't finish any more books, but I did start Lonely Hearts Radio because I wanted to add that little novella pop in there. Because I didn't finish it, I'm not going to put a book cover for it on that spread. It will go into the August pages instead. And I'm going to fill out my reading stats for the month of July. Starting with a nice big book cover, the full size of the Sprocket print for Starling House because it was my standout book for the month. I didn't actually letter a heading for that, but that's what the doily is there for, to be the background for that. I don't think I included a standout book spot in my stats page for August. Interesting. Forgot about that. That's okay. Doesn't matter. I'm also adding a new stat in down the bottom, and that is average time to finish, because that was something I was really aware of this month. It was about 6 days for me to finish a single book, which is interesting because some of them were really short novellas and some of them were regular full-length books that just took me a really long time, so it averaged out to 6 days. I completed 9 books in the month of July, and I'm just doing my pie charts here. I do those ones with percentages, so I ended up with 78% of the books I read were 300 to 499 pages, 22% of them were less than 300 pages. I flipped over to the library versus bought. Of the 9 books I read, 7 of them were library books, I bought 2 of them. And as far as format this month, I read 67% of my books on audiobook and 33% digital. Just going to jump in with my markers and colour these in so it all looks nice with a theme and it really communicates the data, because I just think that's really fun. Really missing my N89 Tombow because I'm just having to use other pens for everything and it would have been perfect. I'm going to have to get a new one. This star ratings graph thing, I did it last month and I worked out after I'd already set this one up that I didn't like it, so I won't be doing this again. But it's supposed to be like how many books you read at each of the star levels. I don't really care about that and it's hard to set up, so I won't be doing that again. My average rating for this month was 3.69 stars, which is a little bit higher than I've had the past couple of months, I'm pretty sure. I didn't actually fact check that, but I think so. And because I added that average time to read stat to the previous, I thought I would go ahead and add that to this little gap on the August stats page as well. There's just the right amount of space for it, so it's almost like I planned it that way, but I actually didn't. Let's have a flip through everything I read in July and then my August tracker pages ready to use as well. If you've read any of these books as well and you want to have a chat about your experience with them, please feel free to jump into the comments. I'd love to know what you think. Also, if you've read anything that you think I would enjoy, please feel free to chuck me some recommendations too. I am always open to them. While we're in the comment section, also don't forget to let me know which book world you would like to find yourself in if you stumbled into it like Eileen in a novel love story. And yes, I do realize that's a really difficult question because I don't actually know if I can answer it myself. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. It means the world to me that you want to hang out and talk about books with me, so thank you for sticking around all the way to the end of the video. I have a whole playlist of these reading journal setup videos in case you want to keep hanging out some more, and I also make a new one every month, so make sure you stick around to catch that next month too. Here are 2 more of my videos that YouTube thinks you might enjoy in case you want to carry on watching. Happy August! I hope it's a wonderful reading month for you.